Welcome back to Left in the Attic. I'm Deep.
And I'm Anna. And today we're talking about law in the Trump era, what you need to know about attorney generals, Tina Peters, and ICE in Minnesota. And we're joined by special guest, 3-time elected district attorney in Boulder County, and one of the candidates for Colorado Attorney General, Michael Dougherty.
Well, good afternoon. Thank you so much for having me on. I'm really excited to be here, and I'm looking forward to our conversation today.
Yeah, we're excited
Amazing.
to have you on. Michael is our first guest of the year. And so with that, before we get into it, I wanted to chat New Year's vibes. I mean, I myself choose usually a few words to theme the year. So do either of you have either a word or a resolution going into 2026?
That's a good one. I feel like I've seen this on social media a lot where people are talking about, like, don't set a goal, set a theme. So I think my theme I want is sort of like build and grow. So one, my daughter is 4 months old, so she's going to be building and growing as well. I'm finally making the 80 in the back, so that's building. And I feel like we're going to be building and developing our democracy. There's a lot of things to do in and around that and my job, so I feel like that's the theme, build and grow.
Wait,
That's
what
great.
about the pod? We're building and growing.
Building and growing the pod. Forgot about that too.
Yeah, it was
The
like,
most
whoa.
important thing.
Don't forget about us, Steve.
Building a movement in an attic.
Yeah, this is episode 8.
This is
actually.
episode 8,
So
yeah.
we are building slowly
Yeah,
but surely.
Great. How about you, Michael? Any big themes?
So I spent a lot of time talking to our twins about resolutions and themes, and ultimately settled on the theme of ultra running.
wow.
I run ultra races. It's part of what brought me to Colorado originally, and I've run the Leadville 100 a couple times and 50 milers all around the state.
Wait, can I just say this is very Boulder of you?
Yes,
Ultras.
although the first one I did, I was living in New York City and I ran the race in Rhode Island. So pre-Boulder, I was already
Whoa.
doing ultra running.
And did you grow up in New York City?
I was born in Brooklyn, grew up on Long Island, and then back to Brooklyn.
Oh, nice. So how long were you in New York for?
So I was in New York all growing up, and then I went to community college coming out of high school. I loaded trucks at UPS at night, worked a night shift, put myself through school. Ultimately went to Cornell, upstate New York. And then after law school in Boston, I went back to New York City to work for the Manhattan DA's office. And I lived in Brooklyn back amongst my family for 13 years while working at the Manhattan DA's office.
Oh, cool.
Wow.
And the theme is ultra running this year.
Ultra running, yes. So for a couple reasons. First, I love running. Second, I needed to sign up for a couple races. So I signed up for some ultra races at the start of this year. And then I view ultra running as the perfect metaphor for this campaign. Just the stamina that's required, the energy, and also the passion I put into it, but also having support along the way. And racing, it's aid stations and support crews. But I feel that way about this campaign too, in terms of the team, the family, volunteers. It's just been really incredible. So I often think about it as an ultra race. My wife reminds me of it if I'm ever like feeling down for a moment or tired. She's like, got to hit the next aid station. Let's keep going. And I think that's a great way to look at it.
Yeah, wait, what are your goals and themes?
I have, 3 words, themes, but I'll just share 2. My first one is nurture, a theme for this year. So I lost my job last year, and I felt like once I lost it, I was quick to pivot career-wise and felt like I was overworking a little bit to create certainty and just manage my stress and anxiety around this whole pivot. I decided that I want to take better care of myself this year so that even if the pivot, maybe it won't land as I'm planning. I mean, we're manifesting that it will, but I want to take good care of myself through the process regardless.
That's great.
So yeah, nurture is a theme. And then my second one is routine, because after losing the structure of having a normal 9-to-5 supervisor, boss, etc., working for myself, it took a while to get into that new routine. So I really want to solidify that, have some boundaries, and allow for that nurture. So those are my two themes.
We got it. Nurturing, ultra marathons, and building.
Building and growing.
Yeah, building and growing.
Each of us has a big year ahead, I think. It's
Yeah.
exciting.
It's going to be exciting. So I'm going to introduce a little bit more to our audience. Again, you've already heard his voice. This is Michael Dougherty, a lifelong public servant, career prosecutor, nearly 30 years of experience in the public sector. You served as Colorado Deputy Attorney General. You led the Sex Crimes Unit in the Manhattan DA's office, and now 3-time elected official as District Attorney in Boulder County. Your guiding principle, as we saw on your website and your materials, is a simple principle: do justice.
Yes.
So again, welcome to the pod.
So yeah, Michael, I would love to know a little bit more about your story and what got you into public service.
Sure. So my grandparents came over from Ireland. They immigrated from Ireland to Brooklyn, New York. That's where they settled, and that's where I was born. All 4 of them came over with nothing but their shirts on their backs.
Wow.
But for the freedoms and opportunities this country offered to them then, and a path that's made so much more difficult to immigrants now. And they had opportunities afforded to them that others do not. but they worked incredibly hard. In a lot of ways, it's the embodiment of the American dream that I'm here less than 100 years later as the elected district attorney running for Attorney General of Colorado. And that's never lost on me. And I'm always humbled by it. I'm inspired by what they did, leaving their families behind and moving here. In fact, there was a write-up in the Irish Independent about me and my campaign and my family recently. And my Irish relatives were all texting me talking about the article, and it made me think a lot about where I come from and why that's so important to who I am, and also my view on immigration and what we need to do in this country. And I know we'll talk more about that, but I recently told my son that, keep in mind your great grandparents, came over with nothing but the shirts on their backs. And he's a little bit of a wise guy. He's like, no pants? I'm like, so that's not what it means. But from there, as I mentioned, I went to community college coming out of high school, but ultimately community service, public service is just hardwired into who I am. I grew up in a family of teachers, firefighters, and cops, much like the Irish families that come to the United States. But so I went to law school knowing I was going to go into public service. And I actually interned with public defender's offices all 3 years of law school. And I had a law school professor who to this day is a mentor and a friend of mine. I just spoke to him last week, who told me if I found the right district attorney's office where the mission is to do justice, that I'd feel really fulfilled. So I gave that a chance, and I had the honor of going to the Manhattan DA's office and then ended up serving there for 13 years. I rose up through the ranks. I became the deputy chief of the sex crimes unit. And handling sex crimes cases, they're incredibly difficult and challenging, but really meaningful as a prosecutor, the fight for justice, and handled homicide cases. But ultimately, I was put in charge of the leadership and day-to-day management of the entire office of 1,300 people before moving to the great state of Colorado.
Okay.
Wow.
And you moved here, as we know, for the ultra marathons.
Well, that was part of the draw, but actually my wife and I decided that if I received the job offer from the Attorney General's office, that we would pick up and leave Brooklyn, New York, and move to Colorado for that. And I was very fortunate that at the time, the AG's office was starting a wrongful conviction project to identify cases where people had been wrongfully convicted in Colorado. So we decided to make the leap from New York to Colorado for that opportunity. That project, for example, led to the exoneration of a man named Robert Dewey, who had served 18 years in prison for murder he truly did not commit. And I can't imagine a worse nightmare than being in a cell every day and every night for a murder you did not commit. And my work, our team, led to his exoneration, but also the successful identification, arrest, and conviction of the actual killer, who's now in state prison. So that was justice for Mr. Dewey, but also justice for the murder victim. And from there, I was put in charge of the criminal section and became the deputy attorney general. And I've handled cases all around the state of Colorado. And that's truly been an honor. And then, as you mentioned, for the last 8 years, I've been the elected district attorney for Boulder County.
And who was the attorney general who you worked for at that time?
John Suthers.
Oh, that's interesting. So was the Republican attorney general and also the mayor of Colorado Springs, but he's one of those guys who was like an old-fashioned Republican rather than whatever we have now.
That is absolutely right. And when it came to criminal justice, he and I saw eye to eye on everything. I mean, his mandate was do what you think is right and let me know if there's a problem. And I ran the criminal section from there. And John and I, if we talked about affordable health care, for example, we would have disagreements. But on criminal cases and the need to act with integrity and be committed to doing justice, he was a champion for that and supported me 100%.
Yeah, wow.
So for the people who don't follow the Attorney General's office closely, people might actually think it's mostly just a criminal justice arm, but they do so much more than that. Right. And I would love to hear, what's your take on the Attorney General's office? You know that you have 3 other opponents in this race. So for our audience, what do you think the Attorney General should do? What do they do, in your opinion, well? What could they do better?
Well, as the candidate who's worked at the AG's office and been a leader at the AG's office, I know firsthand the importance and impact of that office on the lives of everyday Coloradans all around the state. And the way to really think about the Attorney General is as the people's lawyer. And it's almost as though you're going to a law firm to consider hiring someone as a lawyer. And when you go to the Attorney General's office, they handle a variety of things that are critically important to the future of Colorado. So one is, and this is the one that gets the most attention right now, of course, is standing up and fighting for our democracy and the rule of law and suing the federal government in court anytime the federal government is violating the law, the Constitution, and harming Colorado. And that's what Phil Weiser's been focused on since Donald Trump has returned to office.
For those who don't know, Phil Weiser, featured guest on this podcast, but he has sued the Trump administration 50 times.
And he's our current
Attorney General, yes.
Attorney General. Okay.
So, but the Attorney General is also responsible for consumer protection. So scams, frauds, antitrust actions like the merger that was attempted between the corporations that own Safeway and King Soopers. Also, they can take actions against unscrupulous landlords, which Phil Weiser and I teamed up on 2 years ago. So consumer protection is one, environmental justice is another, And the AG has civil enforcement, criminal enforcement powers, but also is the attorney for all the state agencies, including the Department of Public Health and Environment. The Attorney General, as I mentioned, since the Attorney General is the attorney for all the state agencies and state universities, is very active in representing state agencies in any litigation. The AG also takes action to protect abortion access, and the list goes on. So it's a long list of things that the AG is responsible for, and on that list also is public safety and criminal justice as well. So the Attorney General's office plays a key role in standing and fighting for our democracy and the rule of law. This country has survived tests and threats to our future before, but only because the right people stood up and they had the readiness and the ability to meet the moment. And I believe I'm the person who has that now, based on my experience as a lawyer and as a leader. And those are the really two key requirements for any candidate for Attorney General. Have you actually been a lawyer? Have you argued cases in court? Can you lead teams of attorneys to stand up and do the right thing while also prioritizing the office and making sure when you talk about water, environmental protection, consumers, workers, abortion access, criminal safety, criminal justice reform, all those things, that they're being prioritized for the best interests of Coloradans and not with a political agenda in mind.
So to pivot into a little local conversation deep dive, there's been a lot of talk about Tina Peters, and I'm not going to lie, I don't know all the ins and outs of this case, so I don't know.
God,
you want to give
God bless your soul.
Want to give us an overview, and then Michael can chime
Definitely
in.
following any of the details that I'm missing. But Tina Peters was for the audience who might not know, and fill in a little bit of Anna. This is the get to know things for Anna corner.
I'm learning.
The real podcast is a lawyer teaches a scientist about how stupid everything is.
Two lawyers are teaching me today, so
Tina Peters was a county clerk in Mesa County, which is the Grand Junction area. So there's county clerks that are elected in each county in Colorado. Denver has one, it's Paul Lopez, but each of these counties has one. And they're in charge of administering their elections in a unpartisan, fair, and free way. Tina Peters is a Republican MAGA person, and she fell down some rabbit holes where she thought the 2020 election was rigged against Donald Trump, even though Grand Junction and Mesa County voted for Donald Trump. She fell into this rabbit hole where the MyPillow guy, do you know the MyPillow guy?
I have no idea what that is.
So Mike Lindell, the MyPillow guy, he's like a multi-hundred millionaire from, like, I think Minnesota. Mm-hmm. Him and Tina Peters, he convinced Tina Peters, along with other election conspiracy people, to open up the election security systems in Mesa County, hand them over, let other people walk through the systems, basically opened up all this election integrity issues, and this is all against the law. As it sounds, like, this sounds bad. Yeah, it is bad. It is against the law. And because of that, she was prosecuted by a Republican DA.
Yes.
Convicted by, I think, a former Republican judge. And then also by a jury of her peers from Mesa County that probably leads that. So she's now in prison. And because she's in prison, but she said 2020 was an election fraud, Donald Trump is like, she's my gal. She was right on the money. And he has essentially been blackmailing and... I'm not sure if you saw Jared Pulse's tweets on this, but anything I missed about that before we get into the current situation about Tina Peters' case?
No, I think you summarized it really well. One point I would add is the Republican District Attorney, Dan Rubenstein. He's a person of real integrity. He didn't sweep it under the rug. She's in the same political party. He began an investigation. He also knew the investigation was too complex and too large for his office. So he reached out to the Attorney General, Phil Weiser. Mm-hmm. And it's a testament to Dan that he felt comfortable reaching out to Phil. And it's a testament to Phil that Phil then sent 3 of his best people, who I used to supervise when I was in the AG's office, to team up with Dan to investigate, prosecute, and then try that case. She was convicted and sentenced to state prison in part because she showed no remorse and said she would do it all again if she had the chance. That was the gist of her statement at sentencing.
Yeah.
But you captured it well.
Yeah, so election conspiracy person who's a county clerk in jail. Donald Trump, though, has been tweeting about this. Not tweeting, but posting on Truth Social. And he's been saying essentially, like, free Tina Peters. He gave her a federal pardon. In the United States of America, we have 2 systems, state systems, federal systems. Donald Trump can only forgive and pardon federal crimes, not state crimes. So the federal pardon is sort of working its way through the system. God knows what the U.S. Supreme Court will do. I hope they would keep the status quo and say this is a state level crime. You can't pardon it. But now he's also, like you were saying earlier, he vetoed this water compact. He's been trying to cut our grant funding. They also cut SNAP funding. Who knows if this is tied to us just being a blue state or Tina Peters. But that is this issue. And now it's kind of like sitting on maybe the next attorney general, the next governor, our current attorney general, our current governor, about what should we do with Tina Peters? Should we give her clemency? Should we give her a pardon? Should we do a retrial? And I think some people are flirting with this in the Democratic scene, and I was wondering if you have any takes. And do you have any surprise takeaways? I can't believe you don't know who the pillow guy is, Anna.
Okay, well, at least I've heard of Tina Peters, so that's good. And I knew about like the election fraud, and I knew that there was like blackmail happening.
Yeah.
I think my parents had mentioned this to me, and I was like, wait, what? So I was educated first about it. But wait, also, what's the difference between clemency and pardoning? Well, pardoning I get, but what's clemency?
So on a state case, and that's Tina Peters' case, as Dee pointed out, the governor could grant a full pardon, which would be her sentence is ended, and the conviction is removed from her record. Or he could commute her sentence, which means he could reduce it in whole or in part. So the governor could announce tomorrow, you know what, I've decided Tina Peters has served enough time and she should be released. And the governor, as Dee referenced, has indicated that he's currently considering what to do. I will say, as the next attorney general, I'm going to fight tooth and nail for the rule of law and for justice. And assuming this case is still active at that time, I'm going to make sure she serves every day of her sentence. I mean, she was rightfully convicted. No one's alleging any misconduct at trial or by the prosecution on the prosecution of the case. And just quite frankly, if the governor were to reduce or commute her sentence, to me, it would be an absolute miscarriage of justice. It would be outrageous. And now's not the time to bend the knee to Donald Trump. And when you surrender to a lawless bully, they don't go away. They just continue demanding things. And for now, I think the most important thing is to have people who are willing to stand and fight for what's right. I'm going to continue to strongly urge the governor to not cave to the pressure from the president. I recognize it's hard. I recognize it's clean water from the Arkansas Valley River. I recognize that it's grant funding for programs that really need it. But we also need to maintain justice in Colorado, and that means Tina Peters should serve her sentence.
I mean, it's crazy that we're living in this era where you're weaponizing, the DOJ, you're weaponizing grant funding, you're weaponizing even like the FDA, the CDC against states that you don't want, right? And I come from the left spectrum of politics. I'm a progressive. I'm the left side. I'm someone who's always talked about reforming, changing how the police work. I was someone who's saying abolish ICE before everyone's like else is now abolish ICE. And it's funny, it's like one of the critiques that was lodged often at prosecutors' offices and DA's offices was, hey, these people work for the system that's run by rich oligarchs, and they're using the weaponization of the state against you. But I have found that DAs often try to be like, no, we're trying to be, they're the most Boy Scout people I went to law school with often, right? But now you see this naked corruption. And how do you feel like this naked corruption you see like Trump using his DOJs, his personal henchmen, is affecting local law enforcement and DAs?
Well, certainly actions and threats like what he's done with Tina Peters undermines the public's confidence and trust in the justice system at every level. So, yes, it's the president. Yes, he doesn't have the power to issue a pardon in a state case. But I still think it causes people concern about the integrity of the justice system. And that's why it's so important that we restore trust in our democracy and build trust in the justice system. I will say, having prosecuted the King Soopers mass murder case, and I tried that case myself, the Pearl Street firebombing case I'm currently prosecuting, the FBI and the U.S. Attorney's Office here in Colorado have always been great partners. Just coincidentally, I was on the phone for a long time today with the U.S. Attorney for Colorado. We might disagree on a host of other issues, but when it comes to criminal justice and public safety in Colorado, we share a commitment to doing justice and being able to maintain a strong partnership so that when something breaks out, like the King Soopers mass murder, you can have conversations about who's handling this case, how is it going to be charged, what resources do we need. You want those conversations to be absent any political affiliation or political agenda. So I feel really grateful in Colorado up to this point. I worry about the influence of the Trump administration and what that means at a federal level and how that impacts Colorado going forward. And certainly we've seen, based on what's happened in Minneapolis, reason to worry. And I worry about the future of Colorado when it comes to Donald Trump. And I'm going to stand and fight against him. And I'm genuinely worried about if we continue to see federal resources diverted. So, for example, ICE received $45 billion last year. largest funded federal law enforcement agency. Think about the role of the FBI. How is it that ICE now has $45 billion? And the answer is because they're supposed to be building private prisons. We should ban private prisons in the United States of America. They should be outlawed. Yeah. We should be demanding that ICE pull down their mask and do what every other law enforcement officer does in the state of Colorado. And I've worked crazy, horrific cases in New York City and in Colorado, and those officers and detectives never wore a mask. This is being done to terrorize people, and it's terrifying for communities. So we need to stand up and fight for what's right now. And I'm hoping that we have the support of federal partners to the extent possible when it comes to crimes being committed in Colorado. But beyond that, I worry about Donald Trump and what he's doing to Colorado.
I wanted to piggyback on something that you were saying earlier about, accountability and keeping the public's trust. One of the things you did earlier in your career, just a couple years ago, I think this was right around, is you prosecuted Tracy Bernett. And for the listeners who don't know who this is, Representative Tracy Bernett was a representative who represented like Longmont, Westminster, Boulder-ish areas. And I used to be a staffer at the State House, and I was a staffer right when redistricting was happening. So every 10 years, they redistrict all the House districts and Senate district lines. And when they're redistricting Colorado, you oftentimes will draw out different representatives and different state senators. I had seen this firsthand through multiple cycles that representatives and senators kind of stretch about where they live and where they don't live. I think it was really amazing and impressive that when it came out that Tracy Bernett was kind of using a fake address to live and run in a different, safer district than she did, that you were sort of still newer to the DA role at that time, was willing to step up and say, hey, this is a Democrat breaking rules to seize more Democratic power, and that's not right. Can you walk me through how doing that case was, and did you get any pushback from elected Democrats at all?
Yes, to the last part. Yeah. But what I'll say is that as a prosecutor, my North Star has always been to prosecute and do justice without fear or favor. So I've prosecuted police officers, firefighters, elected officials. Everyone's accountable to the law. No one's above the law. So when we learned about Tracy Bernett possibly submitting false information, and what was key about that case was it was the amount of time that she had maintained a fake address in Louisville. It was basically an empty apartment, but she also submitted a false motor vehicle registration with the address on it, even though she wasn't living there. And she registered as a voter at that address, even though she wasn't living there. And then she voted from that address, even though she wasn't living there. She did all those things to try to keep elective office. And the passage of time and the filing of false documents was such that as each piece of that investigation came together, I realized that justice required us to file charges against her. We also had secured from the court permission for a search warrant to go into the apartment. The apartment was basically empty. It was just a complete fraud that she was committing against the community and against the people of the state of Colorado so she could stay in office. So we brought charges against her. The top count was attempt to influence a public official for the filing of those false documents. And ultimately she pled guilty to that top count, a felony, as well as to a misdemeanor, and agreed to give up her office. And she was sentenced to community service and other conditions. But that case to me demonstrates the importance of having a district attorney in that case, or attorney general, who's going to stand and fight for the rule of law regardless of who someone is and what party they belong to. Early on, I was encouraged to get a Republican district attorney to come prosecute the case with me. Mm-hmm. And there's a process if you have a genuine conflict in a case, like if I'm prosecuting or investigating my brother, for example. Yeah. That wasn't the type of conflict here. It would have just been for my own political sake, and I didn't even give it a moment's thought. That shouldn't be how we operate in the justice system, so we kept the case in my office. I kept the case. And that was the absolute right thing to do. I did get pushback from Democrats. In fact, I've never told this story publicly before, but I'm in the attic with you, so why not?
The attic, this is where it happens.
There was a Zoom meeting with Democrats
really?
like a month after she was convicted. So now she's been convicted. The case is over. And the Democratic Party honored her service and asked for a round of applause for her service without referencing the criminal case. And I was on mute, and I yelled up to my wife. I'm like, I told her what was happening. I said, should I say this is why everybody's going unaffiliated? We can't honor someone who just got convicted of committing a crime against the people of the state of Colorado. What are you doing right now? I let that be known in other ways, but to me, that shouldn't be based on what the party is. If party officials, elected officials engage in criminal conduct, their party shouldn't seek to protect them. They should say, hey, we want a full investigation. Yeah. And if the person committed the crime, they should be held accountable. And that's what happened with Tracy Bernett.
And again, as someone who like recruits candidates for office, trains candidates to run for office, and like works and consults on political campaigns, seat shopping was a big thing.
Right.
People in Colorado would look around at seats and like these lines don't matter. Like you could just do this, do this. So it was a thing. And like I reflect back, there's like a little known case. It wasn't reported on a lot. I thought you probably did get heat behind the scenes, but
yes,
you stood up and did what's right. And I see it's had such a large effect. I wish we just had so much more accountability all across the board like that.
It makes a real difference. For example, a couple of years ago, we had a black man who was being booked into the Boulder County jail, and he was struggling, and there was a violent confrontation. But once the sheriff's deputies were able to subdue him and restrain him, a sergeant continued to argue with the gentleman and then tased him out of anger. He was already restrained by that point. So I prosecuted that case myself because to me, it sends a message to law enforcement, like we're not going to tolerate this conduct. And it was a really interesting trial because Longmont police officers were present in the jail. They had actually made the arrest. They testified for the prosecution. The leaders of the sheriff's office testified for the prosecution. The sheriff's deputies testified for the defense. So it was a really tense trial. He was found guilty, and I was honored to handle that case. But that's the point of upholding the law. You then let people know that that kind of conduct's not going to be tolerated.
Yeah. This is actually the perfect segue to ICE in Minnesota, which is, I'm sure everybody by now has seen, I think this started early Jan, where they decided to deploy about 2,000 ICE agents out to Minnesota and do, I guess, what they were advertising to be the largest federal immigration enforcement operation ever, which I just saw today that they're planning to move to Maine now. I don't know if you have seen that yet, but
when I think of illegal border crossings and migration waves, I think of Maine. Who will think of those pesky Canadians going after our oysters in Maine?
Who knows? That was allegedly reported today. It's the 21st. We'll see what happens. But as we all saw, I don't know if it's like the next day after they started deploying ICE agents, they had Renee Good, who is a U.S. citizen, get shot
Mother
3 times.
Right.
At
So
point
tragic.
blank range. And DOJ, to exactly what you're talking about, is not willing to, they're not investigating at all the ICE officer who shot her, Jonathan Ross. And they've basically done a full-blown cover-up of this case. And from what I understand is that Kristi Noem told state officials in Minnesota, you cannot investigate this case, and therefore at the state level, it's not going to be investigated. Like, this ICE officer is likely going to get off scotch-free. I don't know what your take is or if you know anything else.
So thanks for the question. A couple things. First, so tragic and so terrible, and my heart goes out to her loved one, to the entire community in Minneapolis. I also felt like it was inevitable when ICE is rolling around with masks and tensions are high. It just seemed like something was going to happen. I was talking to friends here, as well as colleagues in the DA's office and law enforcement in Boulder County, about how we're going to handle that situation if it happens in Boulder County. And you could just see it coming, unfortunately, but also just so horrifying that she died the way she did, and then maddening in terms of the response. So maddening that the federal authorities first lied about the sequence of events that led to her being shot, and then lied about him having absolute immunity if he shot and killed somebody. So what I mean by that is they said he's a federal agent, he has absolute immunity. That is not true under the law if he committed the crime. And just by analogy, if people aren't aware of that already, what I would say is an FBI agent goes home tonight and hits his or her partner and the police arrive, the FBI agent can't possibly say, I have immunity, I'm an FBI agent. That's not true.
I mean,
they can and should be prosecuted under state law. So I was surprised and disappointed that the attorney general, district attorney, and in Minnesota they're called county attorneys, but district attorney and the chief of police didn't come out right away and say what I would say, which is there's going to be a full and fair investigation, as there is any time law enforcement kills someone using deadly force. And if that investigation demonstrates that a crime was committed, that person will be held fully accountable under the law. No one is above the law. And that's true for ICE agents as well. They should have said that on day one. Eventually, I feel like they got around to saying that. That should have been day one so that the community could trust that there was going to be an investigation. And what Kristi Noem did was try to stress that the federal government's not going to cooperate. In most shootings, just in a murder that doesn't involve law enforcement, for example, the person involved doesn't cooperate. Cooperation is not required for us to do a full investigation, especially when you think about the video evidence and everything, everybody who was there that day. So I'm hopeful that state and local officials will do their job and conduct the investigation. And if a crime was committed that could be proven beyond reasonable doubt, that they'll bring charges. Like right now down in Durango, the district attorney for LITA County, and he said I could share this publicly, and I shared it at a Know Your Rights training I did last week down there. They're investigating and possibly going to file assault charges against an ICE agent for what happened during a demonstration down there. No one's above the law, and we need people to step up and say that and actually do it right now.
Wait, where is that? This is fascinating. So I had a couple follow-ups here because
Sure.
there's such a tense moment right now about state versus federal rights. And Democrats are now all about state rights, and the Republicans who are about state rights are gone now. Surprise there. What would happen? What's happening in Durango with the ICE agent who was charged for assault? Is he still in the state?
He's being investigated for assault.
So he's being investigated for assault,
Yes.
right? Let's just, I know you can't deal with hypotheticals too much, but if we did go forward with this, say something like what happened to Renee Good, unfortunately, tragically happens in Colorado or in Boulder, where you're at, or your attorney general or your district attorney right now, right? And you do an investigation and you find that this ICE agent committed murder, right? Would you be able to order local police to go arrest that ICE agent if the federal folks are not cooperating?
Well, I hope, obviously, that it does not happen in Colorado. But the answer to your question is yes.
And then what happens if they don't agree?
Well, that would be, and I don't say this lightly, it'd be a really dark day in American history, but law enforcement would have to take action to secure that person and take them into custody. So, for example, we had 2 Boulder sheriff's deputies who took someone into custody. They were taking them to an alcohol recovery center a couple of years ago. And when they arrived, he was unconscious, and ultimately he died because of how they positioned him in the back of the van. So we investigated that with our multi-agency team and ultimately determined that they were responsible for his death. And we issued a warrant for their arrest. The warrant was signed by the court. And then we had local law enforcement, including investigators from my office, go out and take the sheriff's deputies into custody. And they're both in state prison now. So it could be awkward and difficult, but we have to work through it because people have to be held responsible when they commit crimes. And I want to emphasize that case and also what's happening in Minneapolis, there has to be a full and fair investigation. Because the worst thing to do would be to charge someone with a crime and then fail to deliver. So I don't want to see them rush and on day 2 make a determination and say he's being charged with murder, and then a year from now have him acquitted. That doesn't instill confidence in the justice system and in our democracy. But there has to be a full and fair investigation, and ideally the federal government would cooperate. That's the best way to get there. All those agencies should be working together and then trust that the people in power are going to make the right decisions for the right reasons.
And so right now there still is potential for the state of Minnesota to investigate.
Correct.
Okay. Because I was under the understanding that something happened where they couldn't, and that's why there was like almost a dozen senior officials resign and all of that.
Yeah. Yes, in part because of how, from what I understand from the media, what they were being asked to do at the federal level in terms of what they were being asked to investigate about Ms. Good's background and her family's background. Mm-hmm. At the local and state level, I think there was concern, just reading between the lines, that without federal cooperation, they wouldn't be able to conduct a full and fair investigation. I think in other factual circumstances, that could be more of an issue. But here, where you have it happening on a street in the middle of the day with people recording it, I'm confident a full investigation could be conducted, whether or not the people involved fully cooperate. Yeah. But you're right. You suddenly have a U.S. Attorney's Office losing a significant percentage of their staff. Think about all the cases they're handling that had nothing to do with this. Mm-hmm. What happens to those cases and those victims and the people who are being prosecuted there and the delays that happen as a result. So I look to my own experience in prosecuting public officials, and we have to maintain the commitment of holding people responsible when they commit crimes.
Yeah, and actually related to that, you were saying, all those people that resigned in the cases, other cases that they were working on, right, that it just get left hanging. And I know at least this was the number back in September. I don't know how many other federal agents have been reassigned, but essentially what they were doing was assigning federal agents from FBI and DEA and IRS and other agencies from their normal job to work on ICE deportations. And that was reducing their hours and work spent on, like child abuse cases and, the other important work that they were doing. All of a sudden, the jobs that they should be doing, they're not doing, and we're spending all this time and energy focusing on rounding up people and deporting people without a criminal record, without due process, right, all of that. So It's just the ripple effects beyond what we can really see.
Yes, no, you're absolutely right. A number of my good friends from law school, but also from the Manhattan DA's office, had high up positions in the U.S. attorney's offices around the country. A significant number of them have left, including right after Trump was elected to a second term, because they did not want to be a part of this administration. But you think about the cases they leave behind, the experience that's lost from that office, and the integrity that you need in every attorney general's office and U.S. attorney's office. And I think that's really significant. And on immigration, if I can add a couple things, we have a immigrant protection program since 2018 in my office. We've been doing Know Your Rights training since 2018. And when Trump was being elected to a second term, well, two significant things happened. One was we were watching the election results coming in, and my wife, Antonia, looked at me and was like, "You are becoming Attorney General. You need to run." Because she knew, well, I don't know if she knew how bad it was going to be, but she knew it was going to be a threat to our democracy. But the second part was we ramped up our Know Your Rights trainings to get out in the community. I also fought to get Senate Bill 276 passed, which gives immigrants enhanced protections in Colorado as compared to other states. And we could talk more about that if you want. But as part of the campaign, anytime I'm going on the road for the campaign, we reach out to immigrant organizations and Democratic groups and offer the Know Your Rights trainings because the fight is on. So we've been doing these all around the state of Colorado over the past year.
Yeah. I mean, it's only been 1 year of this administration, which is insane to think about. Keep grappling with this question because, like, I hear you, I hear other people who are in these positions who say, you know, we want to uphold the rule of law, but we're going to get close to this point, whether it's Minnesota or here, the River Compact, where the state administration is going to say, hey, we think this person committed a crime, arrest them. And they're going to say no. And I mean, we're a little bit of a test waters with this with Tina Peters already. What do we do if, you know, he sends a bunch of people to free Tina Peters? That maybe that's a line, but maybe, you know, before her prosecution started, if they got her out of the state, I don't know. We're in some dark days.
Yes, when I did the Know Your Rights training in La Plata County a couple of days ago. Now, these are people who've had direct conflict with ICE and protesting and having interactions with ICE in their own community. One of the attendees at the presentation asked me if the governor could order the National Guard to fight ICE. And I was like, so let's just acknowledge that if you asked that question 10 years ago, I would think this was absurd. But you're coming from a place of valid concern. Yeah. The answer is no, that should never happen. But that question highlights how concerned you are right now and how worried people are about the lawlessness that's being pushed here. But the rule of law is really the only thing we have going for us. I mean, when you look at the U.S. military being ordered into different cities, Trump last week announced they were being pulled back. That wasn't because he had a change of heart. That wasn't because he suddenly decided, you know what, this is absolutely wrong to ask the U.S. military to police our streets. It's because they were losing every court battle. The attorneys general from those states were bringing lawsuits and winning each one. So the rule of law is the only thing we have going for us, and it's why I feel hopeful for the future. But I don't want to be naive about it either. It's going to require us to fight for today to get to that future. Yeah.
And I imagine that every state right now across the country is preparing in case they are the next Minnesota, essentially. Right. And, you know, you alluded to it a little bit, but if you were Attorney General, what that would look like as far as like what kind of like protections that you could provide or what Colorado could do to protect our, you know, immigrant population.
So a couple of things. First, Senate Bill 276 prohibits state and local public institutions, including law enforcement, from cooperating with ICE or providing information to ICE without a court order. So that's why I fought and supported Senate Bill 276. And in a lot of ways, Colorado stands out in terms of the protections we have now under Senate Bill 276. Part of it is raising awareness for immigrants and for people throughout Colorado so that they know what their rights and protections are. Because we have people who are afraid to take their kids to school because they're worried they're going to be picked up. We have people who are afraid to go to urgent care, people who are afraid to come to the Justice Center, including victims of domestic violence. They're afraid to come and allow us to hold the offender accountable because they're worried they or their kids are going to be deported. So each one of those places are now protected spaces under Senate Bill 276. It's also about making sure that public officials live up to that law. So, for example, Mesa County Sheriff's deputy conspired with ICE to get the young woman, you may recall, coming from Utah, pulled over and detained by ICE. Phil Weiser's office brought a lawsuit against that Mesa County Sheriff's deputy. He's no longer a member of law enforcement in Colorado. Wow. That's what it means to stand up and fight for the rule of law and make sure that, and I imagine that sent a clear message to law enforcement and other public institutions around the state. The Attorney General's office also just launched an online portal for people to submit complaints if they see ICE violating someone's rights or violating the law. So if you go on the AG's website today, you'll see there's a portal there where people can submit complaints against ICE so that it can be investigated and can be followed up on. I'm absolutely committed to doing that as district attorney and certainly as attorney general.
Wow, I didn't know about Senate Bill 276, so I definitely want to do what I can to raise awareness, and I'm glad that this podcast will also help do that.
So previously, it had been an executive order from, I think, 2012 that ICE could not go on school grounds or hospital property to arrest someone on civil immigration detainers. Trump revoked that order, and Colorado responded. And people in Colorado should be proud of the response, which put those protections in place under law.
Which was brought by Senator Julie Gonzalez.
Julie Gonzalez, who's a champion, obviously, for many issues, but also on immigration. And she brought that bill. I was honored to support it. I just wrote an op-ed that appeared in the Grand Junction Sentinel explaining Senate Bill 276, just as a part of a continued effort to raise awareness and to offer the Know Your Rights training, which I then did in Grand Junction. And I think that's so critically important right now. I mean, one of the things that strikes me is there's a photo on the wall in my office, and it's a picture of my dad as a public school teacher in his classroom, and my grandpa is sitting next to him. And my grandpa was one of the immigrants speaking with the class that day on Immigrant Day. Mm-hmm. And behind them on the chalkboard, you see the list of other names of immigrants and where they're from, and then the poem from Emma Lazarus that appears on the pedestal of the Statue of Liberty.
Yeah.
That was then, and now I'm out in the communities around Colorado talking about whether ICE needs a warrant to get into a school. We need to get back to where we celebrate immigrants. They're part of this country's past, present, and future. We should celebrate that people want to come to this country. But in the meantime, we're going to have to make sure we uphold the protections under Senate Bill 276.
Yeah.
And I've been doing the Know Your Rights trainings all around the state. I'll do them for any group. And just today I had a call from a woman, doesn't matter what county, but she said, you can't mention being a candidate for attorney general with this group. Is that okay? And I said, of course. The message is more important than anything to do with my candidacy. I really mean that. This is the work I've been doing since becoming DA in 2018. And it's an extension of that at a time where we really need it because the fight is on. Yeah. And I don't want to wait until after the election to take these trainings, presentations, and discussions statewide about the role of ICE, the role of local law enforcement, how to protest safely, and how we get through this.
Yeah. Yeah, wow. And I just wanted to mention, too, when you were talking about the memory you have of your grandfather speaking at school. When I attended this, when I was at CDC, we had a professor come and talk to us from Emory University. And I remember him saying, which I need to look to see what the current stat is, but he said 1 in 4 kids in the U.S. have at least one immigrant parent. Mm-hmm. So just thinking about all the kids who go to sleep every night scared. You know, I saw a letter actually that was written, that went viral on social media. An elementary school kid wrote a letter to his best friend that says, if I don't come to school one day, I'll always be best friends forever, kind of thing. Like this little boy wrote, like he goes to bed crying because he's scared. And it's just like heartbreaking to think that it could be 1 in 4 kids in America right now.
Right.
At minimum, you know.
You're absolutely right. And when we do these community presentations, we distribute family preparation kits. And it's important that immigrant families complete these. It's like a form that you may use for fire or flood hitting your house and what you need to do. But the saddest thing about the family prep kits is it includes information about what do you want to have happen with your kids? What do you want to have happen with your car, your house, your savings? Because the person's going to disappear.
Yeah.
And they have to prepare for that. And that's the scary reality. And quite frankly, 2 other things I'll add. First, it is a complete falsehood when the Trump administration says it's about public safety. Because the people they're picking up and deporting, including the criminals, are being deported somewhere and then being let free. It's not like they're saying, oh, we're going to take this person who's being prosecuted for domestic violence and we're deporting him to Mexico or wherever they might deport someone, and they're going to be in prison there. Mm-hmm. So there's no justice for the victim. There's no consequences for the criminal behavior. It's the opposite of public safety. It's a public failure in my mind. And I think that's a really important point for people to be aware of. And the reality is how many people of color ask me, hey, I'm in the country legally, I have legal status, but I'm terrified I'm going to get picked up. What should I carry on me? The original, the copy, how do I handle that situation? So it's not just immigrants who are worried about their legal status, it's people of color generally are worried that they're going to be picked up and removed from the street and removed from their life and what may happen to them after.
Yep.
100%. And I wanted to say one other thing when you were talking about preparing these kits, people making a plan. I don't think a lot of people realize that a lot of families have mixed status. You know, you might have a family of 5 and 3 people, you know, were born in the U.S., 2 not, or however that breakdown goes. But it's just in whether or not you have legal status, even with legal status, people are absolutely terrified. I mean, imagine you're in a high pressure situation. People start badgering you with questions or reaching for your car door, and you're trying to answer and remember everything. And if it doesn't come out perfectly, you don't know, you know, what's going to happen. So.
Yeah.
I know.
We should have ended in a happier topic. But no, this is I mean, I really appreciate you coming on and talking about this. To run to be Attorney General during the next Civil War is a tall task. Hopefully there's no Civil War. I mean, it's important that people need to stand up. People need to do this. So I really appreciate what you're doing.
No, of course. It's my honor. I do view it as an honor. To me, the moment calls for it, and for each one of us to step up and do what we can. And for me, given my experience, this is what I can do. We each have different strengths and skills and experiences, but for me, this is what I've done my entire career and what I need to do right now. I'm not term limited as Boulder District Attorney. I could serve another 6 years. I live 10 minutes from the Justice Center, and I have a wonderful job with a great team in the DA's office. But the moment calls for this. So I'm absolutely committed to fighting for Colorado. I do have hope, though. I want to emphasize that. So maybe we'll end on a brighter note, actually. I look at my kids. I look at other kids. I was in a high school last week. I do a lot of community outreach, and I was in a Longmont Public High School. And one of the kids in the classroom asked me, "Where do you see our country in 10 years?" And that was a really important reminder that their future depends on us and that they have a right to have a better future, for us to stand up and fight for democracy, but also mental health, and to reduce gun violence, and to improve the education system in Colorado, to add more affordable housing. All the things that we need to do here in Colorado so that kid who asked that question can have a better future. So as much as we're engaged in the fight of today, and that's what I'm ready for, I'm also going to work tirelessly to build a better future, because that's how we have to focus right now. We have challenges in Colorado beyond just the Trump administration, and that's where the AG's office plays an incredibly important role in the lives of everyday Coloradans.
Well, I wanted to say that I volunteer every Monday night with high school kids, and I have that same exact thought every time I feel, you know, I walk into George Washington High School feeling overwhelmed, the news, all the craziness, but then you see these young kids thinking about their future, and in times that I want to tap out or not pay attention or not do anything, it's like, no, I'm showing up for them, because they still have their whole future ahead of them. So that was like really touching for me. And I definitely agree. We have to continue to show up and lean in and stay informed and do what we can. And I guess with that, the perfect segue to our call to action, which I know, Michael, I did want to give you a minute, because it's related obviously to ICE and Know Your Rights trainings. But I'll let you go.
Okay. For the Know Your Rights trainings, people can reach out to me directly. My email address is michaeldoughertyco@gmail.com, and that's my direct email.
Good luck spelling Dougherty.
No,
you'll see it in the show notes.
Yes. Well, Dougherty, pronounced Dougherty. Think day party.
Day party. I like that.
MichaelDayParty@gmail.com.
Yes.
But it's not spelled Dougherty. So definitely look it up.
So Michael
It'll be in the show
Dougherty,
notes.
CO@gmail.com, and we'll set it up. And I'll do it for any group anywhere in the state of Colorado, and we will make it happen.
That's wonderful. And I was going to also mention that I know CIRC, Colorado Immigrant Rights Coalition, they are statewide, and they also host Know Your Rights trainings, I believe, on Zoom, and they usually post on their Instagram page. But I've been seeing these now for about a year. They've been doing these once a month, maybe more frequently. And there's also whistleblower trainings that we can put in the show notes that are happening locally here in Denver. And, you know, if you do have a nonprofit organization that you would like to support that supports immigrants, Casa de Paz, that means House of Peace, is a really great one. They support immigrant families in a couple different ways. They do postcard writing campaigns where you can write letters and postcards to those in the Aurora Geo Detention Facility. Or also they have volunteers where, as people get released, you can help greet them, give people rides to the airport to see their family, all of those sorts of things. So that's another really great nonprofit. And we'll put it in the show notes.
Awesome. Well, Michael, Anna, thanks for joining us at the Left in the Attic. This is our wrap up. As always, Left in the Attic is brought to you from an actual attic in Denver, Colorado.
It's true.
You can leave us a review on Spotify, iTunes, leave comments on Instagram. or YouTube.
Wait, iTunes, he means Apple Podcasts.
Oh my God, iTunes doesn't exist. I'm not an Apple guy. I'm an Android guy.
Don't tell people that, dude.
Yeah, I make everyone download WhatsApp so I don't have those green bubbles. But yeah, thanks for tuning in. Leave us a review.
Thank you
See you next
both
time.
for having me on. This was wonderful. And I really appreciate it. Thanks.
Until next time.
Okay.